All right, Kurt, our friends are starting to shuffle in. Really well attended event here today, Kurt. You must be in high demand.
Yeah.
Uh, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Anthony Mento at Life Brokerage LLC. I'm here with my partner in crime, Kurt Kauffman, Advanced Markets Director at Lincoln Financial. Um, Kurt, why don't you just take a second, introduce yourself, and be. I know you're a humble guy, but make sure you show off some of those credentials.
All right. Yes, thanks for showing up today, everyone. Yeah, again, Kurt Kauffman. My background trained as a tax attorney, but I spent most of my career in financial services. About, let's see, it's 24 years. About half of that was on the family office and trust company side, where I was initially an advisor, and then I was a player coach, and led a team of advisors and had my own book of some of the larger client business. And then about half of it has been on the insurance side. I really like doing what I'm doing now, where I can just really focus and specialize on big cases all day, every day, and not have the administrative stuff to worry about. So that's what I'm doing with Lincoln now, and helping folks like Anthony meet folks like you that have these opportunities out there, and help you shepherd those to the finish line, and then also give you some ammo to help dig up some new business. So that's what we're going to do here today, and look forward
Yeah.
to working with all of you.
So appreciate that, Kurt. And we do one of these a month, and we'll typically couple them with a live event. And I will say that Kurt absolutely knocked it out of the park on November 6th. We did an event at the Autograph Restaurant, Autograph Brasserie in Wayne, just a stone's throw from the Lincoln headquarters, and that lunch session spurred a bunch of activity, and Kurt has been by our side, helping look at documents and really kind of rolling up his sleeves and digging in. He's not the typical advanced markets personnel where they are subject matter experts, but tend to not get involved with cases or documents. What was so attractive about Kurt is he's a great speaker, he's super knowledgeable, and he's quite helpful in digging in, and will even volunteer to get on a call with the client and their legal representation to talk about some of the things that we're going to bring to you today. So, what was so exciting is that right here we are post passage of the one big beautiful bill, and the insurance industry kind of took a step back and didn't want to be involved in so much of the legislative process and lobbying in either direction for or against. But what we've been asking for decades is consistency. And for years, we operated in a tax environment that was defined by uncertainty, right? We were in a world of temporary. What might happen is QBI temporary? Is our tax brackets temporary? Is the lifetime exemption temporary? Where are we and what do we do? So the conversations with clients, and in our case, financial advisors, and then you're having conversations with clients, the conversation is what might happen, right? So, hey, we think you should move some assets. Hey, we think you should discount some assets. Hey, we think you should employ the use of trusts. But all because we thought that maybe a sunset would occur. Um, well, the one big beautiful bill passed, and with it, we now have a landscape for affluent families and business owners um, of clarity, right? We have defined tax rates. We have final exemption amounts. We have a new framework for business deductions and retirement rules and wealth transfer mechanics. So this clarity has given us actionable techniques where, right, the professionals in this room understand something fundamental that typically clients don't win by reacting to legislation. um, they win by repositioning themselves because of legislation, right? So now is the opportunity to dig in and just create better outcomes. It used to be, hey, we'll run you through the estate tax calculator. We'll grow your assets at 5% or 6%. We'll include a 3% number on the inflation and we'll predict your tax liability at life expectancy, and then we'll buy a whole bunch of insurance. Well, that's gotten a lot more difficult, right? The calculators don't work as well with a $30 million exemption for married, filing jointly. We need to get back to digging in, doing our homework, and creating optimal outcomes. So that was the basis of our presentation and the slides that Kurt and I put together. And you're going to see a nice little 1-2 punch here where Kurt has delivered some technical discussion, and then we at Life Brokerage were able to create some point of sale material that you can use with your client to actually showcase some of the things that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to share my screen, Kurt, and we can kick it off. And I'm hoping that you're looking at a full screen and not the presenter view. Okay. Kurt, you got a full screen there or a presenter view?
I got the presenter view, but it works just fine for me because then I
All
can
right,
see chats too as they come in. So yeah, there we go.
I'll do
There
a
we
quick
go.
little swap. All right. So let's kick it off. First and foremost,
Yeah.
our five topics for today. SLATs, huge opportunity, right? These SLATs have been employed for the last, call it 10 years since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It promotes flexibility, control, access. You're not completely locked out from the fortune you've amassed, and right, create some type of flexibility. QTIP Trust, you're going to see some statistics about how many blended families are created on a daily basis here in the United States. And there are tremendous opportunities to create outcomes for QTIP trusts. Trust basis review. We do an amazing job as an industry at fact finding, tax returns, financial statements, basis review for individuals. We do a terrible job at doing the same exercise for trusts. Trusts are their own living, breathing, tax ID paying entity. So there is a huge opportunity here for clients who have moved money in anticipation of the sunset. And the lack of step up in basis creates a huge capital gain issue for trusts where life insurance can solve many problems. Concentrated stock. How many of your clients are holding a position in a publicly traded company that maybe they worked at, or maybe they just acquired NVIDIA 10 years ago, right? Brilliant acquisition, but what are the tax ramifications that come with it? And then we're going to move into a strategy that's kind of tried and true, that if you can't get anybody to take action, this is your ripcord where you can dip your toe in the planning space, create some value, and move a client incrementally towards doing some more formal planning. So Kurt, let's start with SLATs.
Yeah,
Give us a little history here on what we're up to.
sure. Thank you. Yeah, when most of us started in the business, in the early 2000s, late 90s, you can see there the estate tax exemption amount was, five or six hundred thousand dollars, right? And then moving up to a million in the mid 2000s. Um, we're now at a point here, 25 years later, where it's $15 million, right? And so the point here is if you have clients that have a potential taxable estate, 15 million or more, it would behoove you to approach them and say, hey, look at this. We are at an historically high level of estate tax exemption amount, but at the same time, we're at an historically high level of federal debt. Our federal debt is 38 trillion. See, it just went up just while I was talking. $38 trillion dollars.
Yeah.
And at the same time as that, we have a spending deficit of about almost $3 trillion dollars, meaning that our debt is going up every year. So obviously, taxes will have to increase in the not too distant future. I can't tell you who it's going to go up on. What I can tell you is there's not a lot of charity out there for people that have taxable estates, right? And so if you have clients that are in that scenario, they want to lock in, what they call it in the estate planning world is doing an estate freeze. So if they want to freeze in a value of that estate tax exemption, a good way to do it, like Anthony mentioned earlier, alluded to, while still providing access to those assets. That's the key. Good way to do that is with those spousal lifetime access trust. Go to advance, please.
Sure. Kurt, I'm just gonna just touch on one point,
Sure.
right? This is a big space, right? There was a lot of movement, forgive my art. There was a lot of movement of assets in this window, okay? That creates enormous opportunity for us. So don't sleep on what needs to be done. Also consider what has been done and how to optimize what has been done. So I'm going to come back to that, but remember to keep that visual in your head on how much movement had taken place during that time frame. So keep going, Kurt. Sorry to interject.
Yeah. No, no, not at all. That's a great point. And you're right. It does lead in very well to some of the things we'll be talking about here in about 15 minutes. We can go ahead and go to the next one, I believe. There's nothing there. All right. So here is, it's hard to conceptualize, how we're funding this irrevocable trust. We're locking in an estate tax exempt amount, but yet we're giving them access to it. So the easiest way that I find people are able to conceptualize this is think of, the trust scenario that most people are very familiar with is the common A-B trust scenario, right? Husband and wife have these A-B trusts. They're trusts that mirror each other's trust. And it says that first spouse to pass away, carve out up to my unified credit amount, currently $15 million, carve out up to that amount of my assets, put that into an irrevocable trust, give my surviving spouse 100% access to that trust. However, the whole goal is to shift those assets and all their future growth, while it's in that trust, goes out to our family free of any estate tax. So that's the goal, right? Grow it, grow it, grow it without any estate tax, and then push it out to other family. So a SLAT, if you think about it, is like you're funding that credit shelter trust, B trust, bypass trust, they're all the same thing. We're funding that trust now while we're living, right? And giving our spouse unfettered access to that trust. Okay. So there you can see, funding the trust. And here we're going to insert a life policy in that trust because, especially as you'll see here in a moment, where you have clients that want to build in an income source in that trust, and even more so where we have young clients, go ahead and go to the next slide, where we have young clients like this, where they don't have $15 million now or $30 million now, but they're well on their way. I had clients like this, a year ago, I was still in the family office environment, and I had a client in Scottsdale. He created bulletproof film for windows. And he went out and sold a couple $100 million of government contracts to install that film in government office buildings and in schools. So not a taxable estate now, but he's going to have one when he performs these contracts in the next 2 or 3 years, right? Obviously he will. And so it's a great idea for them to be funding some spousal lifetime access trust. And here we're going to, his wife is still at home raising kids, not putting away for retirement or whatever. So we're going to use that SLAT to also provide a retirement account for her by way of using a VUL policy within the SLAT that the wife is going to be able to draw on. There we go. Perfect. So over the next 25 years, we're going to fund $20,000 a year within the trust, mind you. The trustee is going to be paying that $20,000 over the next 25 years. Then in year 26, when she's 65, that allows her to turn on a tax-free retirement income source. How many of you have tax-free retirement income, right? This is a tax-free retirement income source for over 20 years. and could still provide a death benefit even after drawing on that income. Go ahead and go to the next slide,
Yeah, I'm just going to interject here two things,
please.
Kurt. Like what other vehicle in this universe um escapes the extraordinarily high income tax rate associated with a trust and provides income tax free uh source of retirement funds and creates a legacy upon death of the insured, right? So there's like this trifecta of why you would want to use life insurance. If you get stuck and the client's just hell bent on, hey, I just want to invest in Vanguard or do whatever they want to do, we have an INSMARC module that can help you analyze the various types of investments, apply the zero tax rate to the cash value growth on the life insurance versus a cap gain or ordinary combination thereof of an alternative asset. So amazing. I mean, it's the perfect tool to fund the SLAT, right? And don't let anyone tell you different. We have the economics to kind of prove it out.
Yeah. Yeah, this is just a chart just showing, in graphic form there, the money going into the policy, her taking out $100,000 over 20 years and still leaving $1.3 million of death benefit there. Um, Now, of course, she doesn't have to draw out that income. And then, of course, the death benefit goes up, considerably there, as you see at the bottom. But
Right. Right. And this works
next,
under any different flavor, right? For those of you on the call who hate VUL and want to use IUL, go right ahead. If you dislike both of them, you want to use a survivorship whole life or a single life, it doesn't matter. It's just conceptually how it works. Your preference and risk tolerance is completely up to you and the client. So the policies are interchangeable. What I would stress though is that you want to map the asset class accordingly. So if the client intends to save in a Vanguard S&P fund, then a VUL is likely most suitable, right? If they have a 60-40 blended, then an IUL may be most suitable. If they're in fixed income, then a whole life would be most suitable. So it's really all about using life insurance as the alternative to become the funding mechanism.
well said.
So here's an example that we put together where this particular family. Well, Kurt, let's close the loop on this case study though, if you want to just kind of hit that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just, making the point that, especially where, as Anthony said here very well, especially where um, there is a desire to create a potential income source, not only a potential income source, but a tax-free one. Again, they don't have to draw on it, but it will be there if they want it. So often, anytime you're asking clients to move a substantial amount of assets, there's a natural hesitance, right? Reluctance. And especially here, I've had this happen. I can't tell you how many client meetings I've had where we're recommending a SLAT and they're like, boy, I don't know, 15 million of assets, that's a big ask, right? And so, in a situation like this, you can say, hey, here we're going to build in, whatever, an income source, a reliable income source here and as Anthony said, the big deal is here that it, it's a tax-free either income or growth source for them where they're not going to get that with the typical, your most typical, trust portfolio is just a standard 60-40. We can beat that. You can beat that. So I think
Yeah, so
yeah,
we're pretty good at the example Kurt shared with you is a new money example, and that's classic, right? That's like your bread and butter, your 2,000 a month, right? Simon and Eden, like this kind of hits a big demographic, right? You want to do some planning. You want to make sure the death benefit is outside of the estate. You want to make sure you're protecting the family from future ex-in-laws and right? All the complexities that come with family dynamics, right? And we remember we're creating outcomes. So like classic should be discussed with every Henry high earner, not rich yet, right? Then there's going to be another demographic where clients do have assets to transfer. but they don't want to give up control of that transfer. Um, Here's an example of a $5 million transfer, whereby that asset was income producing real estate, produced net 200,000 per year. Now, male 40 can access that 200,000 per year through his living spouse who's age 39, right? If the slats drafted properly. Um, we decided in this example to add a zero to Kurt's example and use that 200,000 to deploy into a survivorship variable life insurance policy so that the SLAT will now own two assets. It's going to own the income producing real estate and the survivorship VUL. So you see how we've magnified the inheritance to the kids and kept this income potential, right? You look at this policy at age 66 could distribute $850,000 of tax-free income from age 66 to 85 on a hypothetical, 20, call it 20-year linear, plus the $200,000 of income producing real estate. So you're creating a huge income source utilizing the SLAT and properly creating legacy structure through the death benefit for the benefit of the spouse, children, and future descendants. So it's just a simple tool that we're using for clients that have assets to transfer, who want to peel off a portion of the asset or the income from that asset to go and acquire some life insurance to complement the planning that they've already done, right? So really, really neat tool. So then we hit on the SLAT, and Kurt, you did a great job as usual explaining that is the go-to planning structure for many of your centers of influence, particularly trusted estate attorneys. So you want to look for the clients who are concerned about estate taxes, creditor protection, but still want control over access to their assets. They don't want to lock themselves out of what they're doing. Concerned about future generations, and as a spouse who needs additional income during their lifetime. I mean, who doesn't, right? I mean, I know I do. So so there's planning idea number one. Planning idea number two, this kind of hits a big demographic, right? The modern family planning and using a qualified terminal interest property trust. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. Kurt, just give us some statistics here and then
Yeah.
teach us when a QTIP trust is being used. We hear it all the time. We read about it all the time in periodicals and articles, and you see it in a lot of blended families, particularly second marriages. Teach us a little bit here as we take a step back.
Excellent. Yeah, I was kind of astounded. I put this together. Uh, we get so many calls on it that there's a lot of, as Anthony noted there, just a lot of, I won't say misinformation, but a lack of information, I guess, out there. So I wrote a piece on it, and then that piece became an article. Then an article became part of this presentation. And so when I was putting that together, they said, well, why don't you go out and just dig up a couple of statistics just to show, what's the paradigm here? And I was astounded. This is all from Pew Research, as you see at the bottom there. Every day in this country, there's 1,300 new step families formed to the point where it's now 40% of the population. So the point here is that whether you know it or not, this is maybe up to half of your pipeline or current book of business, whether you know it or not. And so where you have high net worth blended families, you're probably going to have a QTIP trust. Now, as you've probably already learned, there's no trust that says at the top of the page what kind of trust it is. You're never going to see the Kauffman QTIP Trust or the Kauffman Credit Shelter Trust. It'll just say the Kauffman Family Trust. You have to be able to read the terms of the trust to determine, does it have a QTIP provision? And like I say, in a second marriage, blended family situation, very often you will. You go to the next slide there.
Yes, sir.
And so again, to understand it, compare it to the traditional situation. In the traditional situation, like we talked about here a few minutes ago, first spouse passes away, $15 million of assets goes to a trust for the surviving spouse. Typically, they'll have unfettered access to that trust, 100% of the income or the principal. They can do whatever they want. Typically, of course, it's a good family situation and they don't do anything because the attorney tells them, don't touch this trust. Spend down all of your A trust. The stuff outside the bypass trusts is the A trust, the marital trust. That is still subject to estate taxation. So before you ever touch the B trust, spend down your A trust, right? That's the traditional family situation. In a blended family situation, it's very different. You may or may not have a B trust or a bypass trust providing income to the surviving spouse. You may, but there's going to be a trust funded instead of a marital trust. It's going to be a marital trust with a QTIP provision, meaning that they can they have rights to income from that trust. In fact, a very high level of income from that trust, but they have no rights to principal, meaning that it's already written into the trust that the assets after the death of surviving spouse, those assets are going to go to family or kids from the first marriage. Okay. So that's why sometimes the QTIP trust is called the C trust. And as you see there in that last bullet, the income beneficiary, the spouse, has control over income, but does not control the remainder interest. Okay, go ahead. Next slide.
Can I make a quick comment here,
Oh,
Kurt?
by all means, yeah.
Okay. So I am in a blended family. I have two children from first marriage, two children from current marriage. Um, the traditional marital trust, right? This is this leaves potential for my two oldest children to end up with nothing. Um, the Q-tip, oddly enough, right? Many professionals think that it protects the children from the risk of the trust having little to no value. But because of the income requirement, I see many of the attendees on this call. A lot of you are familiar with sequence of returns. A lot of you are familiar with longevity, right? This Q-tip, the way that they're structured, I call is like waiting for stepmom to die trust, right? It is God, the longer she lives and the more volatile the market, the less of the outcome that I'm going to receive, or as a stepchild, I'm going to receive in the end. So a poor sequence and longevity puts the residual value of the Q-tip at risk for the children's inheritance. So we're going to keep going on this subject. But I just wanted to set the table there. You could probably imagine where I'm going with this to create a guaranteed outcome. But I just want to make sure everyone is aware of this, and I'll have a piece that we built after the next couple slides from Kurt. So Kurt, walk us through how the Q-tip works, and then we'll get into some of the mechanics.
Yeah. Um, in this graphic here, imagine in your mind that there's a line going from top to bottom after B trust, because that's we have the B trust, the bypass trust, um, and then there's also going to be essentially the bypass trust for surviving spouse. However, like I say, the surviving spouse is only going to have rights to income from that, not to the remainder interest. Okay. Just go ahead and go to the next slide if you would, please. And so, as Anthony noted here, they have the right, the surviving spouse of a Q-tip has the right to generate all the income that that trust can provide every year, net of fees. This is going to lead to, as you see at the bottom there, a huge issue in every single one of these trusts. I guarantee it. I've had dozens of them. A huge issue with trust depletion. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And three big issues here that cause this significant depletion. First of all, the income requirement. The income is typically written as as I mentioned, net income and or what they call 5 by 5 power. They'll have a right to the beneficiary will have a right to demand at least a net 5% of the principal value each year. That's going to happen, as Anthony sort of intimated there, in a down year, in a sequence of returns, bad scenario where it's a down year and there is no income, right? They're going to say, okay, I want 5% of the principal value every year. Well, imagine that. Imagine in 2008, and surviving spouse is saying, okay, I want my 5%, and the portfolio is down 40%. You're never getting that back, right? So that's the first big issue. The second one is trust. In the second bullet there, the trusts are sort of expensive to keep up. You have trust administration expenses, you have trust accounting and tax preparation expenses, and then you have the portfolio management fees, right? All of those together amount to about 1 to 2%. And then in my mind, the biggest issue, because these are the people that are the most disappointed, is the income tax that disproportionately impacts the remainderment. In fact, it exclusively impacts the remainderment. Go and go to the next slide there, please. And this is why. Over the last 20 years, 25 years, the tax code has been changed to the point where a trust pays income taxes like an individual that makes $626,000 there. That's the top tax bracket for an individual, $626,000. A trust pays the income tax at that rate when they make $15,000. So probably any decent sized trust in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the year, they're in the top tax bracket for the rest of the year. Meaning that, as you can see there, they're going to pay from any investment return. And again, investment return, all gains in a trust belong to remainderment, right? So focus on that. This is impacting the remainderment of the trust. So 37% ordinary income tax rate, plus if you're in the top tax bracket, remember you pay that Medicare surtax too. You add 4% onto that. So for any of their like actively managed stuff, their ordinary income, 41% tax rate. Any other preferential stuff, it's not 15%. If you're in a top tax bracket, you're paying 20% and the 4% Medicare surtax, so 24%. And then if the beneficiaries are or if the trustee or beneficiaries are in a state with a state income tax, then you add on state income tax, average 7%. So you can see you come away here with about anywhere from a quarter to a half of your investment return, which belongs to the remainderment, being eaten up by taxes every year.
Mhm.
Huge issue. You had a comment there, Anthony?
No, I wanted you to hit this fiduciary, and then
Yeah,
I have a model that I'll share.
perfect. Yes. And so I'm guessing I'm seeing what, 55 people on this call live. At least a handful of you are managing money in a trust. You need to keep this in mind. And you are equally legally liable to everyone in that trust. A trustee and the person managing money for a trustee has a fiduciary obligation to treat the income and the remainderment equally, meaning that I can't load up that trust portfolio with a bunch of bonds to placate the income beneficiary. That produces income, but you have no capital appreciation for the remainderment. By the same token, I can't load up the portfolio with a bunch of small cap stock. Now I have a bunch of capital appreciation, but I have no income, right? You have to treat them equally. And that sounds very easy, right? Just your typical, blended portfolio. Well, with this trust issue, it's not so easy, is it? As you've seen, at least a quarter and up to half of your investment return every year is going to go to taxes, no matter what. It's going to go to taxes. And you have 1 to 200 basis points of upkeep and administration fees, right? and you have 5% at least going out to the income
Mhm.
beneficiary. You can
Mhm.
see what the issue is here, right? So go ahead there, Anthony.
Yeah, Bill Bengen won the Nobel Prize for the 4% rule, right?
Yeah.
I think it puts a lot of stress on a portfolio when you're taking the fees, the 5% income requirement, and you're introducing inflation, taxes, sequence of return issues. It puts a lot of pressure on the trust to continue to perform. And here is how the outcome could be negatively impacted for the children of the first marriage, right? There could quite literally be nothing left. So we want to walk through this one particular example, Kurt, and then again I'll show a model
Perfect.
that speaks to the sequence issues.
Yeah. So what happens every time? Now, again, I'm not going to say that the spouse is always going to take all the money, but they have a right to,
Mhm.
and typically they do. So that's the situations you want to focus on and bring to the family a, another option, let's just say. These are very tender situations, as you can imagine. Um, the kids from the first marriage are maybe don't have the best relationship with the surviving spouse, and they see the account value going down, 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 down every year, right? You can approach the family and say, there's a way that we could lock in a known amount as remainder interest now to deal primarily with the tax issue that 100% impacts the remainderment, right? There's nothing else they can do, as we've seen here. There's nothing else that they can really do to address this situation where you have all these outflows because the inflows are being trimmed so heavily by the income tax. So, do we have an investment solution out there that could address that huge tax bite? Well, as you know, life insurance is a potential solution for that situation. So, in this here we have a pretty typical client scenario. So they're funding. We're going to use Angie's Unified Credit to fund a QTIP trust. $10 million in this case is what the trust is being funded with. We're going to conceptually, not realistically or whatever, but we're going to conceptually carve out half of that trust from the get-go here. So $5 million of that we're going to put into a VUL policy. The trustee is going to pay $48,000 per year from the trust portfolio into this trust held life insurance policy. That is going to produce a death benefit of $5 million for the remainderment. So I compared that using the future value of a net present interest. That $48,000, if it generated in a typical trust portfolio a 6% rate of growth every single year, and that growth was 100% long-term capital gains and qualified dividends over that 20-year period with the trust taxation, that would amount to $1.5 million. That same $48,000 a year put into the insurance policy, as you see there in that last bullet, generates almost $3.5 million of death benefit into the trust. Substantial difference for those remaindermen, I think you'll agree, with a relatively modest investment within the trust.
Yeah, why not create this hedge of an outcome to the children from the first marriage, right? Why take on this unnecessary pressure and risk of four sequence taxes, fees, inflation? Why go through that when you can look at those children in the eye and guarantee at least a $5 million outcome um, for their future, right? You're again, we're in the business now of creating outcomes. So, right, you're looking for clients who are in a second marriage, who want to pass assets on to future generations. They want to keep money in the family, right, and not spread it amongst their future ex in-laws, and maintain some control of where their wealth is going, after death, right? It's an amazing tool. You know what? I may not have put in my sequence, but piece, but I will send everyone on this call. One is Kurt's article. Two is the slides. Three is the sequence piece and the SLAT piece, and then you're going to probably want a couple others as we walk through this. So we're going to shift as we kind of approach the top of the hour here for a couple quick hits here. Um, Kurt, this is an easy one. It's a quick one. Um, right. We have a tendency to do a really good job fact finding for the individual, but we do a terrible job fact finding for trust assets. Right. If you go back to that previous slide of the history of the estate tax, and you saw that spike and the area that I colored in blue, there was a lot of movement of assets. And in most trusts, particularly revocable trusts, Kurt, uh, they do not get a step up in basis like an individual would. So an individual purchases an asset for 100,000, they die with it valued at 300,000. The inheritance is 300,000, right? If they sell the asset, the 300,000 basis is stepped up to 300,000. So there's no gain if sold immediately. So a step up in basis, right, erases any unrealized gains. So where you look at wealthy individuals with highly appreciated assets, you typically want to die with them versus transferring them because of that step up in basis. Now, trusts don't get that treatment. Um, the assets are removed from the estate, which also removes the concept of step up basis. So if you are looking at, and we built this calculator around this concept, if you're looking at money that has moved into trust, you want to go get, just like you do on the individual side, you want to go get trust tax returns, trust financial statements, trust basis reports, right? Dig in with this with the accountant. They're going to love you for this, and the T&E attorney. Dig in and show them that if they move $22 million back in 2018, okay, when the exemption allowed it, and the asset grew at 10%, right? Asset inflation is running rampant. I mean, you could have been blind, could have blindfolded yourself and throw a dart at a piece of real estate that had appreciated at 11%, the stock market that had appreciated at 12%, cryptocurrency, Nvidia, you name it, it all appreciated. So you have had significant growth, right, over this period of time. Where if I look at a transfer that occurred in 2018 with a 10% compounding return is now worth $42 million. Well, guess what? There's a huge tax liability associated when the next generation sells that asset because basis doesn't carry forward. So again, why wouldn't you help create a better outcome and provide liquidity to that trust in the form of life insurance by peeling off just a sliver of that $22 million to buy a single life or survivorship life insurance contract? It just makes all the sense in the world. And if you continue to run this out, you see the taxable gains that compound at 10% annually at life expectancy. There's a huge liability and opportunity where life insurance is just a prudent recommendation. I mean, it's almost malpractice not to talk about it and address how the capital gains treatment would look in a New Jersey-based domicile trust with capital gain exposure. So I don't know if you have any more comments on that, Kurt, but
Yeah, actually, I bring up the fact that I hinted at it earlier. When you're working in this realm with the CPAs and the attorneys and even the trustees, if they're willing to make you part of the team, they don't get the kinds of creative solutions like we're talking about today. I promise you, they just don't. It's the most conservative world, especially as it comes to investing. They're not hearing about these solutions. They have no idea they don't know what they don't know, as the kids say.
Yeah.
So you can really become a valuable part of the team just by doing something like Anthony's showing right here. This has never come up with them, I promise you.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Um, Another quick hit, right? Diversifying against concentrated stock positions. Um, Kurt, why don't you give us a quick overview here?
Yeah, very, very common scenario. My one of my very first clients when I started into business, I inherited this client, had a big position in Merck. Her dad worked at Merck and had gifted her stock during his lifetime. And then she married an Army colonel, and she allowed him to manage the portfolio. And I inherited them as a client. And like I say, this was by far their largest holding. And I would do quarterly reviews with them, and I'd say, hey, this is a huge concentration risk for you. And I would have to have them sign off, telling me, giving me permission to hold on to such a concentration. And I said, there's ways that we can deal with this in a tax efficient way. In a concentration scenario, you always have one, I can't afford to sell it, right? I'm going to pay too much in tax. And or I just don't want to. I had a sentimental attachment, and I was gifted it. I worked there, whatever. There's a sentimental attachment too. Um, so these clients also, in addition to those two factors, they were in love with the Merck dividend. Back then, this is the early 2000s. Back then, Merck was paying like 8%, something like that. Huge dividend for them. And so I couldn't get them to move on this at all. Well, then about a year later, the Vioxx scandal comes along, and people started dying from taking this Merck drug, and the value of Merck drops about 50% overnight. And then I get the call from the client saying, I think we'd like to go ahead and pursue that charitable trust strategy we were talking about and diversify. And we ended up doing that, but we ended up doing that with half the value of what they would have had before. So that's the risk. You've seen it. And what we're going to talk about here is a very quick, easy strategy for clients like that. Going to go to the next slide, please. Can't remember. You can go and go to the next one. So here is, in fact, this kind of looks like my clients actually. So here's Walton Penny, and Penny owns $4 million in one stock. So 100,000 shares at $40 a share. And maybe like in this scenario, you have clients that have a concentration and they don't have life insurance. This is a slam dunk, or it should be. Go ahead and go to the next slide.
Yeah, this is a clever way of presenting, Kurt. I'm blown away. So please continue.
Yeah, very simple. I mean, it's hard to get clients to go through some of the trust stuff. It's very complex. You have to explain for hours what's going on. This one you don't. You say, okay, there's a need here for some insurance, and there's a huge need to diversify, right? So we're just, and you can imagine maybe this is a staged, maybe this is occurring, you're doing the same thing for 4 years or 6 years or whatever, and this is just year one, because obviously there'd still be a big concentration. But what we're going to do here is just simply carve out a quarter of that portfolio, sell it off, take the after-tax amount and put it into an IUL. As Anthony noted here earlier, not only are we diversifying them, but with an IUL, we're kind of taking them out of the market too, right? It's not a market correlated return at that point. So think of what they have here now. If you go to the bottom there, just doing the math, you started with $4 million, sold a million, which will produce a $3.5 million death benefit. Add all that up, that's $6.5 million. That means that stock, had they done nothing, that stock would have had to get to a share equivalent price of not 40, but $143 to match that same amount of total value that they got with the simple carve out to the IUL policy, right? Very simple, very compelling story, I think, especially where they have these big concentrations.
Yeah, Lincoln's had this module in their Design It. It's called Design It software for decades. I mean, I remember looking at it when I came into the business in 1999 or early 2000s. Um, but again, the story of asset inflation had just kind of further progresses this discussion and brings it to the surface. And is a really, really simple yet powerful technique, right? If I can guarantee an outcome of that those shares going from 40 to 143, I'm interested, right? I want to learn more. And you're not asking them to give up the entire fund, right? Because the fund is winning at that stock, betting on a company you believe in, watching them deliver on returns and employment and right. So you're still in the game. You're not taking the client out of the game, but you are making prudent diversifications, repositions. So well done, Kurt.
Well, go forward. I just make a one more follow-up point. Let's see. Go forward one more, I believe. Oh wait, no, no, no. Well, yeah. We can go just use this slide. So what I illustrated, well, what this PowerPoint illustrated was using a single payment of $700,000 into an IUL. Now, again, if you're getting the objection, well, what if I need it kind of thing, right? Well, if you're making a single pay $700,000, obviously you're going to have a MEC there. So if that's the objection, they say, hey, we might need those assets. Say, okay, well, let's take that $700,000, put it into a high yield account, savings account, your money market account. And then from that account, peel off, what are we showing here? Annual policy premium of $83,000. So $83,000 a year over 10 years. We'll do a 10 pay to avoid the MEC. Therefore, they will now have access. They can now draw tax-free income from the IUL if they had to, or if they desired to. Any comments on that, Anthony?
No, I mean perfect, right? If you want to preserve the non-MEC status, you could always use a premium deposit account or just a holding account to feed the contract over a 10 pay. And I also really like the option B, right? If you want to use option B, you always could, right? You can even bring death benefit down a little lower. But I like, the guaranteeing the outcome of 3.4 is kind of the purpose in this. But if you wanted to look at something alternatively, you start a little bit lower and surpass that 3.4 if you're expecting a long, healthy lifestyle.
Right.
Um, so yeah,
Well, that's probably all that I needed to cover. Anything else you wanted to cover before we open it up to?
well, I do have a question for you, but I just wanted to close with just a
Oh yeah.
survivorship standby trust where if you can't get your client to move or do anything, this is kind of the ripcord for me and for a lot of producers that we talk to. Um, they know they need to do something. They're not willing to part with any type of gift or transfer that want to retain total control over the asset. In this example, a survivorship standby trust is using a second to die policy. If you can find another financial vehicle to accomplish this, please let me know. But I can't find anyone other than a survivorship life insurance policy in which the older spouse owns the policy. So if I use the concept of me and my wife, I own the policy. I'm accumulating assets in the policy. It's a max funded design, VUL, IUL, whole life, whatever your flavor. And there's one simple technique that I'm going to use. Where I get a chance on the application to name a contingent owner, I name the Anthony J. Mento Family Trust. So I do have to go out and establish a trust. It was about $3,500 worth of legal expense. But it did set forth the terms and parameters in which I wanted to carry out my wishes, provide my spouse an income, guarantee an outcome for the two older kids and for the two younger kids. So in this instance, at my death, because by contract I've named the trust as my contingent owner, the policy passes after I'm done using it, right, to accumulate wealth and supplement my income on a tax-free basis. It then passes to the Anthony J. Mento Family Trust, where now all the trust language kicks in and all the protective measures kick in. Upon second death, right, because this is why survivorship is so important. Upon second death, the benefit pays. There's a cash value component that provides any income distributions that are necessary to my spouse, but then the remainder death benefit will go to benefit the kids. So you kind of have your cake and eat it too without making a transfer today. It's a future transfer upon first death. Now, if my spouse were to die prematurely and before I die, then I'd have to be strategic on when I want to make that transfer. But I don't have to make it now, and that's kind of where like it's like the starter kit for estate planning. It kind of eliminates all the objections and it's a very little expense as an entry point, but a very effective tool. And we have a model here that explains this as well. So we've answered a lot of questions along the way, but I did have one that's still open. Kurt, if you go back to the SLAT strategy, um, one of the questions from the audience is why would you not do a Nevada trust, referenced as a Ning for Simon versus the SLAT? And when I say Nevada trust, um, this is a trust that really is effective in the state of Nevada, right? Corporate trustee in Nevada. It's a non-grantor trust, and it's often to help with the sale of business or large capital gains or state taxes. So it's an incomplete gift. But how would you answer that question, Kurt?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if they have a large asset like that, that they wish the creditor protection as getting an outside taxable state, 100%. None of these trust strategies are exclusive. I mean, they're always part of a much, much larger overall strategy. Obviously, you're going to have, you know, also some revocable trusts. You're going to have, lots of other, like I say, common AB trust. There might be special needs trusts. I mean, none of these things work by themselves. And that's a great point, where you have a highly appreciated asset like that, again, you want to get out of the estate as well as obtain your creditor protection. Yeah, absolutely. Use that.
So, that was the last unanswered question, Kurt. So I'm just going to kind of close with this. Reach out to Life Brokerage if you have a scenario you want to look at. If you have documents that you'd like us to take a look at, start asking those questions. What is the basis in your trust, right? What does the marital trust have a QTIP provision? Does the trust have provisions to provide spousal lifetime access, right? These are things that are not commonly talked about. And between Life Brokerage and our resources at Lincoln, in particular, Kurt, we can kind of get to the root of the issue through a fact find and present to you some of these models that could be effective and move the needle with your centers of influence for your clients, and their trust and estate attorneys. So I promise I will send out a recording, copies of any models, Kurt's article, the sequence of return piece that I didn't show you today, a SLAT piece, and a trust basis calculator, along with the survivorship standby trust model. And I want to thank you for your attendance today. Have a wonderful end of the week. And Kurt, thanks for being with us again. You did an amazing job.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks for all of our participants out there. Look forward to working with you.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye, Al.
Bye bye.